Andrew O'Keefe, seen every afternoon at 5:30.
That's right. Deal or no deal, on the 7 Network.
Andrew O'Keefe, good evening.
Evening, Bruce. How are you, Phil?
Yes, lovely to talk to you again, Andrew.
Do you remember your Uncle Johnny?
I certainly do. I remember him as a very generous, huge-hearted guy who used to smoke Sterling cigarettes at the end of the table at the Christmas lunch and the Easter lunch and the birthday lunches. And you'd turn up to his house and he'd be wearing a full-length box fur coat and platform heels with silver-painted nails. And you thought, well, he's a terrific bloke. He's not like my Uncle Mervyn, but he's obviously something very special.
But very much like Mother.
He really was a beautiful man. I remember, when we'd go around there, he always insisted upon performance from his nieces, nephews, sons and daughters, and the house was always full of joy.
Isn't that lovely? That's a great memory.
I suppose you were
beautiful. I mean, he was obviously mad as a hatter in many ways, my Uncle John. And I think we were kind of, even as very young people, somewhat aware of that. But it was part of the magic of being around him.
I was going to say you would have been very young at the time, surely. How old were you when he passed away?
Well, I was only 8 when he died.
Yeah.
People often say to me, "Oh, well, you mustn't remember him," but truly I do. I mean, he was such a huge personality. He left a very big mark. Every time you'd go to his place, he'd give you a T-shirt or a sticker or an album or something, just to remind you, in case everyone else had forgotten, that he was Australia's king of rock and roll.
Isn't that lovely? It's a real great memory.
Yeah. Was he your inspiration to get into the business yourself?
Oh, look, I think. It's probably, a genetic thing in some ways. I wish that he was around often to give me a bit of advice on how to handle certain aspects of public life. But, I do take, I think as I get older, more and more inspiration from his sheer drive, his determination to get up every day, no matter, how things were going in his own life, and get out there and prove himself all over again.
Andrew O'Keefe, I think there's a bit of Uncle Johnny in you. You've got a lot of flamboyancy and fun on that Deal or No Deal.
Well, I can't take all the credit. We've got a terrific team, but that's pretty much our mission statement. We know we're not splitting the atom or holding the key to world peace, but we do think if we can give people a bit of fun every half hour, that we've done our job.
Oh, it's very entertaining. Of course, in contrast, you're doing Weekend Sunrise, aren't you?
Yeah, indeed. And again, whilst we approach very different kind of subject matter, we're always very aware that it is the weekend and people want to unwind. So we try and make it as entertaining as possible, even when presenting the grimmest of stories at times.
Now, you're a good singer yourself. Would you contemplate ever bringing an album out, Andrew O'Keefe?
Oh, look, I think, the public would be probably rightly sceptical of a game show host releasing an album. Back in the 50s and 60s, that was probably the done thing.
Yes, hello, Tony Barber.
Yeah, exactly. But I do love having a sing. I do like writing music. That's the way I kind of, I relax off the box.
That's interesting. You're in Superstar, aren't you? I keep reading that.
Yeah, we did a great little tour of Jesus Christ Superstar, which wrapped up about a month ago, and it was lovely. It was a really exciting thing to do, being on stage with incredibly talented musicians and dancers and actors, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of why I got into the business in the first place, which was being surrounded by creative people.
I want to go back to Johnny O'Keefe if I can and ask you, Andrew, do you have any of his keepsakes? Was anything passed on to you of his?
Oh yeah, I've got a number of keepsakes, but one of the recent acquisitions, which is a very special one, which was a waistcoat, a red velvet waistcoat with gold lining that turned up in the mail from an old lady in Western Australia who's a bit of a Deal fan, and she said, "Look, this belongs with you, not with me." your uncle was in Perth doing a telethon or something back in 1959, and my brother was his chauffeur for the 3 days. And when he dropped him off to the airport at the end of the event, he asked Johnny whether he had a souvenir of some kind, and Johnny didn't have any fan cards on him or any paper or anything. And he said, "I'm sorry, I've got nothing for you. I apologise." And he got out of the car, and then he came running back and knocked on the window of the car. And he said, I'll give you this. And he took off his waistcoat and gave it to the driver, who then wore it into the family breakfast that morning and said, "Guess whose waistcoat this is?"
Isn't that lovely?
Fantastic.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Great story.
Have you contributed to the book by Jeff Apter?
I did not, but Dad had a lot to do with it. Dad was very, very close to Johnny. I mean, they were, in some ways, they're peas in a pod. Dad's, by all objective accounts, a very sort of straight, conservative kind of man, but they both had precisely the same flaming, Catholic ambition to succeed in life, and they were very close. I mean, they loved each other enormously, and Dad was, as you can imagine, just completely devastated when John died.
Yes, so unexpectedly, so suddenly.
Since then, he's really kind of taken a role, I guess, as the protector and part of familius of that side of the family. So he's been very intimately involved with Jeff's book.
Where do you think the madness and the rawness and the show-off part of Johnny O'Keefe came from? Because his father was conservative, Raymond O'Keefe, and Thelma Kennedy.
That's right. Well, Ray was a pretty conservative sort of guy in some ways. I mean, he ran a furniture store in the centre of Sydney, on George Street in Sydney, and he was the mayor of Waverley, and quite a responsible sort of bloke. But of an evening, he was the piano player and band leader of Ray O'Keefe and the Club Royal Dance Band, which, used to play at the Trocadero and, the Flamingo Club and places. So that's, I think, where the musical talent came from.
Yeah, that's it.
Thelma, his mum, was a bit of a quiet wildcat in her own way. She was the first woman to surf at Bondi in a swimsuit.
How daring.
And I think she really loved the fact that Johnny was a bit wild.
Isn't that funny? Because they were very straight-laced and conservative. He was so opposed to that and so different that they would have been quite embarrassed. But if there was a little bit of that in them, they'd love it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Pop Ray, tried very hard to get John into the furniture business. But you can imagine, a 19-year-old Johnny O'Keefe confronted with a decision of furniture or rock and roll. It wouldn't have been too tough for him, I don't think.
No, it would not.
He put so much into it, I think he burned himself out too young, don't you?
I do think that. He had an incredible energy about him. And, like many people who have an unnatural energy, he also had terrible lows, I think it was Goethe, the German philosopher, who said that, the brighter the light, the deeper the shadow. And I think that was very much the case with John. And he was also one of those people who really personified the old expression of being generous to a fault. I mean, he would literally give you the shirt off his back, and his every waking hour was devoted towards, either getting the public to love him or getting the public to realise the beautiful talents of other people. And I don't think he spent a lot of time just soaking up the sunshine, So he burnt out.
And sadly died just a year after Elvis.
Indeed. And I think what amazes me is I sometimes approached by people on the street who have very fond memories of seeing Uncle John play in various places, and two people have said to me, when Elvis died, it was a tragedy. When John died, it really broke our hearts because he was our Elvis.
Absolutely.
Later on tonight, Andrew O'Keefe will be talking to Pee Wee Wilson from the Deltones. Did you ever meet him, or...?
I have met Pee Wee. He's a terrific guy. I must say I haven't seen him probably for 30 years, but what a terrific performer in his own right.
Has great affection for your late uncle. We'll be talking to him later.
Well, you know, I can understand why, and Johnny also had tremendous affection for all the musicians he played with. When you look at some of those the reels of the old gigs, those guys were doing something completely new and utterly incendiary, you know?
Absolutely.
Rock and roll these days, and they play, they're fantastic effects, and they're a full 360-degree experience. But those guys on stage literally tore rooms apart just with the power of their own talent.
And breaking a new generation. It would have been so easy to come out as Perry Como or Doris Day, but to get that new generation into rock and roll was quite an experiment.
Indeed it was. Although, you know, as you know, we began this interview, you played Counting on You. So I think, you know, that was the flip side of John. He also had a real affection for those ballads because he did have a very warm heart.
Of course. Well, I think you've demonstrated that tonight for us, Andrew O'Keefe. Thank you very much on the occasion of the new book that's coming out on Johnny O'Keefe, talking to his nephew, Andrew. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Oh, my pleasure, Bruce. Good on you, Phil. Lovely to chat.
Good night, buddy.
Good night.